Welcome to a new video, and this video we are going to talk about inheritance. Now, inheritance by itself, it's an object-oriented programming related topic, and it's a little bit complicated. And the good news is I'm not going to get and dig deeper in this concept. I'm just going to show you a basic idea about what is inheritance, how do we use inheritance, and there's a lot of details that you might have to deal with later. So, what is inheritance? Let's just ask that question. Inheritance, as simple as it could be defined, is basically inheriting mean creating a class using a class that already exists. That's basically what inheritance is. So let's go back again. Creating a new class using a class that's already exists. That's what inheritance is. Now the question is, why would I want to do that? Well, one of the main reasons is to not duplicate the same code over and over in your program and make it big. Like if I have a function called jump and in one class, and I have another function in another class called jump, and both of them are going to be doing the same thing, why do I have to repeat writing the same code here and here? No, that doesn't make sense. We're trying to get rid of redundancy. That's what we're trying to do here in inheritance. Another important concept, inheritance, basically there's a lot of object-oriented programming concepts are built based on inheritance. Now, since this is not an object-oriented programming, I'm not going to get into the details, but polymorphism is basically related to inheritance. What again, polymorphism by itself, it's a concept. Again, I don't want to go in details because I want to keep it as simple as possible. Bottom line, inheritance, it's a big deal. In this video, we're just gonna try to find out or understand a basic idea about what is inheritance. But as I said before, inheritance is creating a new class using a class that already exists. Now, let me just tell you about scenarios. Where do I need to use inheritance? Well, let's just imagine we have a hospital, for example. And in this hospital, we have doctors. We have a lot of different doctors. We have surgeons, we have dermatologists, we have radiologists, a lot of different types of doctors. Now, I can go to each one of those doctors. Of course, we know that they're all doctors, but each one of them is different than the other. They're not the same, but they have a lot of things that they are common in. So polymorphism basically means creating one class, we call it the superclass or the base class, and we call it doctors. And then we create other subclasses or derived classes, depending, for example, surgeons, radiologists. And then instead of repeating the same code in each one of those two classes, we just basically going to connect them to that base class and let them inherit from it. And of course, each one of them by itself is going to be looking a little bit different than the other one, but basically they share a lot of similarity, and that's why we have the base class that we're going to inherit from. Let's say you want to create a simulation software for a zoo or a video game for a zoo. Well, what do you have in a zoo? You have animals, but animals, there's like tigers, there's lions, there's elephants. There's birds, there's monkeys. Now, all of these are types of animals. Now, for example, I can come in, and if you think about each one of those animals at the zoo, they, for example, have an ID. So instead of me repeating the same ID variable in each one of those classes, the derived classes, the subclasses, we just create a class called animal and we define ID there and let them all inherit from them. And that will save a lot of code and time and space. This is in general what inheritance. Now, what you need to understand here, inheritance doesn't mean creating multiple objects that belong to the same class. No, it basically means creating multiple new classes using a class that you have. I do have an example here that I want to show you, and I'm going to go through this example in detail. So what I'm doing here, basically, I want to create software for animals. I have a snake, I have a fish, I have a dog, and I think those are the three animals that I have. Yes. Now, what I did here to implement the polymorphism, I created a class. I called it home bit. Now, what you need to understand here when you create inheritance or you try to implement inheritance, you can describe the relationship between those classes. For example, this is going to be the base class of the superclass. Those are going to be the derived class or subclasses. To understand the relationship between inheritance, between classes, inheritance, it's basically, you can come here and say fish is a home bit. Dog is a home pet. Snake, even though a lot of people don't think that way, is a home pet. So you see the relationship between them is this object to this class is basically an object of this class. A dog is a home pet. That's basically, if you want to understand inheritance, as how do I describe that kind of relationship? Okay, so let's just go ahead to the base class and just talk about the base class. In the base class, I do have three private variables: string for the color, string for a name, and integer for the age of that home pet. And then I have the constructor, the default constructor. Let's say I have no information about that home pet. And then I got the argument constructor, as you can see here. Set color, set name, set age, and I have the setters and the getters in this area. Here we go, the destructor. And finally, I have two methods. Those are very, very important methods. The first method is called display. This display method is going to basically print the information of this home pet. And breathe is just going to describe the mechanism. I think there's an N. I am not sure if this is correct. Again, I just copy and paste it. I'm just going to leave it as it is. So this basically, this method breathe is going to describe the mechanism of how that animal or home pet will breathe. Okay, now let's look at the dog as a class. Now, if I want to create a dog, let's imagine I have no home pet class here. In this class of the dog, I'm going to have to come here and declare his color, declare his name, and declare his age. I will have to have constructors for that job to assign those values. I would need to have the setters and the getters for all these variables. I will need to have a display. I will need to have a breathe. All these methods need to be part of the doc. But again, instead of me repeating, before I say that, let's just continue with the dog. I just have one variable that I created here, which is ear sizes. I'm going to go small, medium, large. I have the constructor, and I have the argument constructor, setters, and display. And let me just come here and create the destructor. Okay, so this is the dog. Now, as I said before, the dog also has a color, has a name, has an age. Let's go down to the snake class. In the snake class, also, snakes, they do have colors, they have a name, they have an age. And they have all these methods that I need for that snake. I will have to display their information, and I'll have to define the mechanism of breathing. So this is basically what this is what is equal for the snake. Same thing here with the fish. The fish basically will breathe. Have a variable here called the fin length, and then I have a constructor. I need to have a destructor here. I forgot about it. And same thing here with the fish. So the bottom line, what I'm trying to say here is, and I'm going to talk about the breathe, by the way, in a sec. Let me just take this away. We don't need to talk about that now. For each of those classes, the dog and the snake and the fish, each one of them will have those variables. We'll need to have a constructors to assign values to them. We'll need to have a setters. We'll need to have a getters. We'll need to have a display method that will show the values, and we'll need to have a breathe method. So instead of me copying this section and pasting it inside the dog and inside the snake and inside the fish and modify it a little bit, this is what inheritance will allow you to do. Inheritance will allow you to inherit from your superclass into your base class. So that is a little bit more equivalent like to copying the code and putting here so there will be a member of this class dog. Now, how do we do it? Now, this is, again, a very simple definition, but there's a lot of details that we have to pay attention to, and I'm going to go through those details one by one. Let's talk about the mechanism. How do I inherit? Number one, you come after the name of your class, the base class, and you put a colon, and then you have to put a specifier here. I'm going to go with public for now, and then I'm going to explain why public, and then you put home pet. And then you do the same thing for the snake, and you do the same thing for the fish. And that's it. I'm missing one part here. I just need to put call set. I'll just call it here. Control C. And I'll pass this variable. I'll put semicolon here, and this line should go away. I'll do the same thing here. Control C, and Control C, put this here. And what did I miss? The dog. Control C. Your size. And put semicolon here. Okay, so let's get back here. I basically, with typing public and the name of the superclass, I'm inheriting everything you have in this class into the new class. So basically what I'm saying here, the dog will have a color, will have a name, will have an age. I can set the color, set the name, set the age. I can get the color, get the name, and get the age for the dog using those functions that will declare it inside the home pet. Now, as you can see here, I didn't have to repeat the same thing here. Same thing will be applied here for the snake. Same thing here will be applied for the fish. Now, is it that simple? Unfortunately, no, that's not the case. We have a lot of details that we have to pay attention to. Now, I'm not going to, again, you don't have to remember this, but I'm just going to say it here. Probably in future videos, this is going to be explained with a lot of details. And this is what we call the specifier. The specifier could have three values, main three values. It could be public, could be private, it could be protected. Now, protected is something new. We didn't hear about it before. At this level, we're just going to go with public. Public basically means when you get inherent from the superclass, if it's public, it's going to be public. If it's protected, it's going to be protected. If it's a private, it's going to be private. Now, one thing you should understand about inheriting from a class, even though, and this is extremely important, I'm inheriting from the home pet class into the dog, those are still private variables. I don't have access to them inside the dog class. So if I come here inside the dog class and I decided that I want to change his color or his name or his age, I am not allowed to do that in the dog class. Why? Because those variables are private. I can't do that. I cannot have access to those variables inside the dog. I don't have access to them inside the snake. I don't have access to them inside the fish. I don't even have access to them inside the main function. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem. It's not really a problem, but there's a solution for it, of course. So what do I have to do? Again, if I want to have access to those variables directly, I can't do that directly. I need to go and use the setters and the getters because those setters and getters are public, so I can have access to them here inside the dog, and I also can have access to them if I want inside the main function. But if I want to change that, and by changing that, what I mean basically, I want to have access to those variables inside the dog class and inside the snake class, but I don't want to have access to them outside of those classes inside, for example, the main function here. In another word, what if I have a variable inside my base class and I want to have access to it only inside the classes that's going to inherit from that home, from that base class? If that's the case, it's recommended, and that's what you're going to see a lot, protected. Change that to be protected. Protected is basically a specifier that's between a private and between public. What does that mean? You have a protected variable here. Still, if I go to the main function and try to have access to it, I'm not allowed to do that. I can't do that. But if I inherit from a superclass inside the drive or subclass, since this is protected, then I will have access to it inside the dog class. So this is, again, something very important to understand when it comes to those specifiers. Now, of course, if I change this one to be private, a lot of rules are going to change. If I put pub protected, a lot of rules are going to change. Again, at this point, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, now that we understand how this protected word works and how do I have access to those values, the next question that you need to understand is, or you need to know the answer for is, when you inherit from a superclass, am I going to inherit everything? Like everything? The answer will be no, not everything. Now, let's talk about what am I going to inherit and what I cannot inherit. Well, these structures are not going to be inherited. They're going to be called, of course, but you don't have access to them. We have something called friend functions, but again, we didn't mention what is a friend function. You don't have to worry about that. It's not going to be inherited. Copy constructors are not going to be inherited. Again, we didn't mention what is a copy constructor previously, so you don't have to worry about that. And there is the assignment operator overloading that's not going to be inherited. Again, those details, you don't have to worry about them. It's not part of this video. In advanced videos in the future, we're going to talk about them. But for now, this is basically what you have to understand. Okay. Now, let's come back and see how do we implement, how do we work on this? Or most importantly, how do I deal with the constructors of the base class? For example, if I came here and create a dog, this is the constructor of the dog. Okay, and in the constructor of the dog, I'm only going to be actually assigning a value to the ear size. Now, since I know the color and the name and the age are going to be inherited, and I need to find values for them. So what's going to happen for them here inside the dog class of the snake and the fish? Well, the answer for that is by default, the default constructor of the superclass is going to be called every time you create a class, an object of the base classes. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to come here and say dog. I will call it D1. And in D1, I'm going to pass the size of the ear, which is I'm going to go with small. Let's create, what is it? The snake. Snake. S1. And what was the snake thing? Oh, why is it snake? My bad. I changed it to bird and I forgot to change. Let's go ahead and do that. Bird. I'm pretty sure some of you guys were just wondering what kind of snake have a beak. Yeah, in a fantasy world. Okay, so it's a bird. It's a bird. It's a bird. So let's go ahead and do that. Bird B1. That's a D. And we'll go with 1 inch, 1.02. And then finally we have fish, F1. And I'll put the fin, let's go with 2.25 and put semicolon. So here we go. This is my dog, and this is my bird, and this is my fish. Each one of them, I assigned one of the values. Actually, the only value declared in those variables. Now, the question that I asked before is, what will be the values that's going to be assigned to those variables? Again, I told you the default constructor is going to be called by default. Okay, since that's the case, let's go ahead and try to see if we can actually print d1.display. and then b1 dot display, and then what do we have here? We have f1 dot, let's just put the semicolon here so he doesn't get mad. f1 dot display. Now, before I do anything, I want you to try to expect what kind of results are going to be printed on the screen. Now, let's go back here. The display function is declared inside the base class. And here it is. This is the display. I inherited the display inside the dog and the bird and the fish. So basically this method implementation is going to happen. The name is going to be printed, the color is going to be printed, and the age is going to be printed. Now, since those values were assigned to the default value, because we said the default constructor is going to be called the moment you create any object belong to those derived classes, that basically means I will give the same value, unknown, unknown, and 0 for each one of those classes, those methods. So let's just give this a try. Uh-oh. No. Let's see. Where did I mess it up? Here it is. Missing a semicolon. Yep, here it is. Okay, that was easy. I'm happy it's easy. Let's go ahead and try it again. And here we go. Unknown, unknown, 0, unknown, unknown, and exit. Now the question is, how do we fix this problem? Well, and this is extremely important. This method here that I have, which is called display, is getting the job done, but it's missing one piece of information for the dog and for the bird and for the fish, which basically the variable that I declared here. So I want to include that variable to be printed here. So what do? This is what we do, and this is extremely important. You get the method and you change the implementation to whatever you want it to do. So I come here and I'll put display, and I will just, let's copy this one line, put it here. And what am I trying to ear size? So I'll just put ear size here. And then I'll call the function get ear size. Okay. And I'll do the same thing for the other one. Now, before I go to do that, this, whatever I just did here, it's called method overriding. Method, remember the term, method overriding. And there is something we talked about before, it's called method overloading. You need to know the difference between them. This is method overriding. What is method overriding? Method overriding basically means when you inherit from a superclass and there's a method inside that superclass that you inherited, but it doesn't fit for your need. It's not what you asked for. This is not what I'm expecting. I need to see the information of a dog printed here, not only those 3 variables. So what do you do here? You copy that method and you put it in your class, and you just change the manipulation or the process that's going to be implemented inside the body of that display function. So basically, even though we inherited from it, but we're going to change how the function should act. Now, is that enough? No, that's not enough, because we fixed the problem of showing the error size, but what's going to happen to those variables? What is going to happen with those? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come here and show you how do we do the same thing with the other ones. Let me copy this, and I'm going to put it here. This time, what do we have? We have the Control C, the beak length, and then I'll say get beak length. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing with the fish. Kind of disappointed because I want it to be snake. I like snakes. Display, what do we have? We have the fin length. And get the fin length. I looked for properties or attributes that distinguish those animals from each other. So That's what I came up with. So let me run it, and you'll see that I will get the problem solved, but not 100%. It looks like I am missing. Oh, there's a lot of errors here. Oh, I forgot to do the implementation here. Okay, did I do this? Even this one is missing. So return ear size. Return peak length. Oh, what kind of return is that? Return. Yep. Yep, should work. Why is he complaining? It's a Visual Studio thing. Return. Control C. Oh, I think I missed a semicolon. Semicolon here, semicolon there, semicolon here. Let's give this a try and see if he's... No, he didn't like it too. My bad, my bad, my bad. I was just trying to save some space, and I end up writing the code in the wrong place. And here we go. So, earth size, oh, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work too. Let's see, why do I get those results? So let's talk to the dog. The dog will go and call this function. Where's the dog? Ear size. This is going to call the set. Oh, the implementation of this again. I forgot it. So this ear size equal ears size. I thought that I got everything done, and it turns out no, I didn't. So this dot arrow beak length equal beak length semicolon. This is the setter, and let's go ahead and do the same thing here. This fin length equal fin length semicolon. I think I took that H away. Now this should work. And here is small, exactly, those are the values. Now, as you can see here, we're missing the color, the name, and the age of these animals. The question is, how do I get that done? Well, there are two ways. I'm going to show you both of them, and feel free to use any of them, at least for now. Well, before we do that, let me just show you, if I want to show the values of this, of the name and the age and the color, what do I have to do? You have to come inside the display method for each one of those drive classes, the dog, for example. You come here and you type this. You type home pet colon display. This basically will call the display function that belong to the home pet class. So you copy this and you put it here so you can include that part in your code. Let's just run it, and you should see the unknown, 0 and this small. Okay, we're getting somewhere. The last part is how do I actually control the values? And instead of calling the default constructor, I would like to call this constructor. Well, let me just tell you something. By default, whether you like it or not, this what do you call it? The default constructor is going to be called. Now, if I want to change those values, well, I have two options, and I'm going to show you those two options. How do they work in each one of those classes? So let's go with the the one that you can guess. I'm just going to have to include those variables as arguments inside the dot constructor. And this is not going to be enough. I need to go down. And this is what I'm going to do. And look at here. This set age, and you pass age. And then this set color, and you pass color. And then this set name, and you pass name. The order is not really important here. So that's one way to do the job, by actually passing those arguments and using the set methods. Now, what is the other method I was talking about? Well, let me just copy this again. This is what we call member initialization list. Again, feel free to use any one of those. You don't have to stick with whatever I'm doing. Now, how does this member initialization list work? Now, this is a little bit new, and I really didn't want to talk about it, but the book that I'm using mentioned it, so I'm going to go with it. Between the open braces and the closing braces and the open of the curly braces, you put a colon here. And then after that, you type the name of the superclass, which is home pet. And then in this area, you put color, name, age. So what did I just did here? This part is me calling the argument constructor. Where is it? This one. So instead of actually having this copied inside the dog class, destructure method, what I'm going to do, I am going to call the argument constructor directly by typing the syntax that's here. Now, there's a lot of other uses for this, but this is one of them. If you want to call the argument constructor, that's basically what you have to do. You have to go here and do it that way. Now, this also will solve a problem. What if I don't have the default constructor here? Well, the only option left for you is basically to go with, where is it? With a member initialization list. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for the fish. So I'll go here and let's go and put this down. And then in this area, I'll just put home pet, color, name, age. Now you're going to have to actually go down and actually pass values now. Let me color. What is the dog of my color? He is black. And of course it's a string. So actually black, but let's just keep that. Name. What do you call a dog? I don't know. Nick. And finally, how old is he? Let's put 7. Now let's go to the bird. The bird is yellow. I'm going to call him Snoop. I'm going to give him a 3 years old. And finally, the fish, I will give him a color of red. Call him Mario. And it's 1 year old, or 2. Let's run this. And here we're Nick, black, 7, small. Snoop, yellow, 3, okie dokie. The only part left here is I have another example of where overriding should be used too. We saw the disable method, as you can see here. The implementation in the main function, or sorry, in the superclass, didn't fit for our need here in the derived classes, so we had to override it by calling the same function again inside the function here, and then adding some part to it. Same thing we did with the bird when we talked about display. Same thing we did with the fish when we talked about it. Now, let's talk about the method of breathing. Breathing here, this mechanism is explaining how the breathing will happen in animals, basically. Diaphragm will go down, then the air is going to go inside the lungs, and then after that, the diaphragm is going to push the air out. You exchange the oxygen, you get the oxygen, you let other gases go out with your breathe. Again, I'm not a biologic. I don't know how to explain those details. I just know how they work. But again, if you're interested here, just read this and you'll understand how pets breathe. Now, this definition of breathing works for dogs, works for birds, but it totally doesn't work for fish. Fish works using a different type of mechanism, which I, again, Googled it. Again, this is not my words. This is how fish breathe. So this is another case where sometimes you must override it completely. Sometimes you can override it by using using the function that you had before. So again, just like we did with the display, we're going to do the same thing with the breathe. Now remember, since dog and bird, they don't have to do the same thing. Like the mechanism of breathing is explained and it fit their needs. The only thing I have to do is to come here inside the fish and change that mechanism. So I'm going to cut this part and put it here. Of course, that's not going to be enough. I need to put them all in one line. Why you don't like it? Okay, now it's working. If I want to go down here to each one of those display method, and I'll just call d1 dot breathe, and I'll do the same thing for the B1. I'll do the same thing for the F1. You'll notice that the dog and the bird will breathe using the same mechanism, but when it comes to the fish, it uses a different mechanism. This is, again, like 5% of what inheritance is, but those are just the basics. I'm going to show you an example. Let's see if I come, where is it? Did I use any getters or setters for the, okay, let me just take this one as an example here. You see this protected that I was talking about? Okay, because I have protected, let me just comment this out. I could come here and say this, look at this, name equal name. That's acceptable. This age equal age. That's acceptable. This color equal color, and that's acceptable. Why is that acceptable? Because I declare those variables as protected, so I do have access to them here in this area. But let me try to do the same thing for the dog here. d1 dot name equal, let's say, Steve. And it gives you error. This is, see, you cannot, you have to use get name. Oh, sorry, I didn't call get name, I just said name. And again, it's inaccessible. You don't have access to it. Why? Again, I'm trying to have access to the name from the main function. I cannot because it's declared here as protected. I do have access to it here inside the dog with no problems. Why? Because it's protected. So that's basically show you how protected works. Now, let's just keep this for now. Let me just go up here and change this to be private. wanted to see that notification. Now you can see here, oh, I got the same error now, inaccessible. You don't have access to them because they're private. That's basically why we have protected here. And let's take this one away. And let's come here and let's just leave this one here so you will know what is the point of protected. Okay, so I guess this will be the end of this video, and I hope you guys have a good day. See you later.